So hi everyone, this is Tammy, and first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to all of the nurses out there. We feel like you're really on the front line of everything right now, and we all appreciate everything you're doing. So thank you so much, and I'm hoping that this presentation might help even just a tiny bit as you're facing this COVID-19 pandemic. So usually this is much more of a interactive webinar. And so the fact that I can't see your face and I can't hear you will be different. But there's usually a lot of information that we go over. The full training is 2 days. So this is going to be really quick. And what I'm going to try to focus on are making sure you all have the skills, because I think that's what you need, what we all need right now and always. So the skills I'm going to teach you are really life skills, but certainly in the time of this time and COVID and fearing for everyone's safety, including ourselves and our families, I'm hoping these skills can be particularly helpful. So this model was developed by Resources for Resilience, and they are actually out of Asheville, North Carolina. So this is a North Carolina bred model, and I've really loved it. It's very much based in neuroscience, which I'm going to hit just a tiny bit. So it's very steeped in research. And I actually work at Aspire Counseling Group. We are in Raleigh, and that is my background. So basically, the idea behind this is that because you all are nurses, you may actually already have a very good idea about how your body and brain respond to stress and trauma. But this is actually a public health model. So we teach everyone this model. So a lot of people don't know that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking to you all about that. But the skills actually help you claim your own ability to reset your nervous system. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how connection and compassion are hardwired in us and how they help us through times like this or times of stress. Okay, so really quickly, when we say resilience, when we talk about what is resilience, usually we have people brainstorm, but we can't do that. Like, what are some good things in your life? What are some hard things in your life? And resilience is, we all have hard things in our life. I mean, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be the things on this list. It doesn't have to be anything that are this serious. It can be. But it can be things like, I don't know what's going to happen to my job right now. My partner his or her job is not going well right now in this pandemic. But we also always have, all of us have some things that are good in our lives. They could be that we have some people we can count on that are safe for us, emotionally safe for us. We have hobbies. Often we have nature outside. Nature is a huge resource for me personally. Pets. A lot of us have spiritual beliefs, religion, God, things that really help us get through our core values. Those are really good things. And resiliency is just truly, well, also, if you look on the bottom of the fulcrum, there are things about us. Those things don't change. Hard things, good things can change in our life, and we can make changes in our life to add more good things. But there are certain things about us, where the fulcrum is on the bottom, that don't change. Just, we all have a unique nervous system. We all have a unique body. Our genetics, our DNA, our resiliency or ACE score, which I'm actually not going to talk about, but that's referring to the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. And what our life story is, sort of what's our life experience been. Those are just things about us. Kind of also go into this idea of what makes us resilient, or what can resiliency be. But resiliency is just when our scale can tip toward the positive, even when we have hard things in our life. And we can help build some positive things in our life. So this whole model is really, this resilient zone slide. This is the key to the model. It's the whole conceptual framework. Basically, I think all of us have this sense that we know when we're in our best place. Our resilient zone, that green, that lighter green bar in the middle is when we're feeling our best. It doesn't mean we're in our happy place necessarily. It doesn't mean that everything's okay, but it's a place where we can think our thoughts and feel our feelings and move on and be okay. We may be feeling a little bit maybe amped up. So up here, I think you guys can see my arrow. We may be feeling a little bit amped up, a little bit of anxiety in our system. You know, we need a little bit of that just to get through the day. And then there are days, you know, times during the day when, you know, we get a little bit of a charge, like maybe when we get up out of bed, you got to have a little more energy in your body. We get going, you know, we sit down, we have breakfast, whatever, you know, you have a little bit of a rest time, so the charge comes off. But that's just sort of the way we're wired to be. But we're still in that resilient zone where we can think our thoughts and feel our feelings, and our nervous system is in balance. We have our best capacity for health, well-being, and connection when we're in our resilient zone. And that's where we want to be most of the time. But then things happen, and they can be little things, they can be big things, but regardless, we're going to call it a jolt or a threat. When we're faced with any kind of stress, it can be right now, of course, can be COVID-19 or a trigger. Energy goes into our system. That's just the way it works. And that's the way we were designed to work. And if the energy doesn't get released in a survival response, like an act of protection, that energy can get kind of stuck. So we might get stuck in this amped up place where we're feeling really anxious or hyper, sleepless, angry. I kind of feel on edge when I'm really on edge when I'm up there, can also come out kind of in rage or even in physical pain. I'm sure you've seen this with people. It also can show up as shutdown energy. Like we can, a lot of times what I find is if I stay up here too long, and I think this is true for probably all of us, if we stay up here too long, our bodies can only handle that much energy for so long, and then we can kind of drop down and we end up in this shutdown place. I think people think of that more of as a depressed place, but more of a helpless, sad, exhausted, disconnected, withdrawn, numb, or pain. Again, it can manifest in pain in the body. But, you know, everybody experiences this. We all have times in our life when we feel amped up or when we feel shut down. That's just the normal way of being a human in this world. And it only becomes a problem when we get stuck up here or stuck down here, because we want to be able to kind of come back to ourselves and get back in our resilient zone where we can think our thoughts, feel our feelings, be connected with other people. And the problem I think right now is that with COVID-19, this resilient zone right here can actually be wider, and we have more resilience in our system, or it can be narrower, and it can change with all of us day to day, hour to hour. And honestly, I think with the threat of COVID kind of overlaying everything right now, I think most of us, I think our resilience zones have shrunk a little bit. So they're a little bit narrower. It's a little bit easier or a lot easier to jolt us out. And then I guess I'm thinking about some of the folks on the front line. If you're not sleeping well, or if you're feeling like nervous and scared a lot, then it's hard to get this kind of energy to kind of come down so you can be, I guess, more in your, well, we're going to talk about it, in your thinking brain. So some of these tools that I'm going to talk about today help us get back in that resilient zone, okay? But the one thing I really I want to stress over and over again is that this is normal. This is human. This is how we operate. So the power of this model and the power of even knowing that is that there's nothing wrong with you when you're having these experiences. Either you're amped up or you're shut down, or you're going back and forth between both. But what we're trying to teach through this model is that you just like allowing you to have your own owner's manual to your body's safety and threat detector. So as nurses, you may already know this. I'm going to hit the brain stuff really fast, but just to give you an idea of why we are teaching the skills we're teaching. If we overly simplify brain organization, we would put it in three different parts, right? So our oldest part is our survival brain, sort of in the back of the brain, down there by the brainstem. And the survival brain is in charge of everything that we can't have any conscious control over, right? It just keeps us alive. It's what's responsible for allowing us to feel sensations in our body, our automatic body functions like breathing, heart rate, digestion, reproductive functions. And it responds based on sensory input from our emotional brain, which is a little bit more midbrain, kind of the middle of your brain. Your emotional brain, which is actually where your amygdala is. I'll talk very briefly about that. That is it's where we are all constantly assessing levels of safety or threat. And when the emotional brain senses something that's threatening or scary or stressful, it sends a message down to our survival brain, basically saying danger, danger, okay? And then that survival brain sort of takes over. And when that happens, we get flooded with lots of sensations, maybe if you're gonna be amped up, you might see increased heart rate, faster breathing, our digestive system goes offline, lots of things start happening because we're in basically our survival brain, we're in fight or flight. And this can happen just when we're scared about something, but there isn't necessarily an actual threat like a tiger in the room, but we're just nervous about something. You know, I was nervous about giving this talk and I was noticing a lot of activation in my body. Like my heart was racing a little bit and I could just feel this nervous energy in my limbs and that kind of thing. And that's what we're working with in this model, is that noticing what's happening in your body, the sensations that are happening in your body. Our oldest part of our brain is our cortex. It's sort of the front part of our brain, and it is in charge of all our thinking. It's kind of, I think of us as identifying as just our cortex. When we think of our brain, we think of our thinking brain. It is in charge of critical thinking and executive functioning, and it actually kind of integrates input from all three parts of the brain. But the most important thing to take away from this part of the talk, though, is that when the emotional brain senses danger, and it has assessed a level of threat, it sends out an alarm and the survival brain takes over and this goes offline. So basically, when you're not in your resilient zone, you cannot think clearly. So that's why we are trying to teach people skills to get back into your thinking brain, because that's what you need right now. So I was talking about your amygdala. Basically, that is a part of your emotional brain that assesses both safety and threat. But one thing that you may or may not know is that we have a negativity bias in our brain. So yes, it assesses safety, but it's going to pay way more attention to threat. So humans are wired to have a negativity bias. So remember that, because it's much easier for us to pay attention to all the things that are wrong than to maybe a few of the things that are right. And when we only pay attention to what's wrong, which makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint, because it keeps us safe, it helps us avoid danger, but it also doesn't allow us to realize, oh, there are some other things happening. I'm not going to go over this. This is the hand-brain model. It's a really cool way to understand the brain stuff that I just tried to talk about super fast. But if you Google Dan Siegel hand-brain model, you can see tons of people on YouTube who will demonstrate for you the hand-brain model. If you have any interest in like teaching your family members or other people you work with, or even patients, it's a super fast and easy way for them to understand, oh, that's what's happening. That's why I'm feeling so like anxious or stressed out or, scared or whatever it is. It helps people understand it more. It's great. You should really Google that. I'm also not going to talk about this very much, although it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So when I talked about our amygdala signaling that there's danger, we have actually a cascade of things, not just fight, flight, freeze, that we do to keep us safe. And actually the first thing we try is connect. So we're going to hit connect as a skill in a bit, but connect, that's the first thing we try. We look around to see, if we feel like we're unsafe, we look around to see, is there anyone, do I have any allies here? Are there any safe faces? Who can help me? That's the first thing we do. That doesn't work, we go to fight, flight, then we go to freeze, submit, collapse, which I could talk about more, but in the interest of time and in getting you more into the skills, I won't get into that as much today. But so the foundational skill for basically for this model, the skill that you use with every other tool is sense in. And that the whole idea around sensing in is just paying attention to what's happening in your body. It sounds simple, but as human beings, we don't really do that very well. And we don't do that on a regular basis. We pay attention when something's wrong, but we don't pay attention generally. So to restore balance to our nervous system, you have to signal safety to the survival brain. And the only language that the survival brain understands is the language of sensation. Remember I said the thinking brain's offline. So if you want to signal safety to your emotional brain and your survival brain, it's through the language of sensation. So that is what we're talking about today. So what do I mean by that? You probably know, but really it's worth talking about a little bit, because the more I've done this and the more I practice this model now, it kind of becomes second nature to me to go, oh my God, I'm so, my muscles are really tense. I just start to notice the sensations before I even necessarily realized that I am stressed, if that makes sense. So you have to kind of practice it. So sensations we can notice, of course, muscles tense or relax, breathing deeper or shallower, faster or slower. How's your heart? You can always sense, is your heart rate okay, or is it too fast? What's the temperature like? Some people can get hot, they can get really cold depending on where they are in terms of their zones, if they're amped up or shut down. Do they feel any pressure? I know you've had people talk about pressure on their chest, or even pressure in other parts of the body, on the shoulders. Vibration is sort of like, if you think of vibration like tingliness, or just like feeling like lots of little, I almost feel like little bits of energy, it's just sort of this tingliness. And where do you notice it in your body, right? Is it in your chest? Is it in your gut? Is it in your hands? Is it in your face? I mean, you have to really pay attention to start noticing, where do you feel it in your body? So I think I've talked about all of that. But since then, again, it's the way we talk to our safety and threat management system so that the tools can work. It's a critical tool. So one thing I want you to think about for yourself is, how do I know when I'm starting to feel better? If I'm sensing that I'm amped up or I'm shut down, and I know I am, and I'm not able to sort of get myself back, what is it I want to know? What are the sensations I want to experience when things start to get back into the resilient zone? And I have done this with so many clients and friends over the years, but always I notice a deeper breath. People, as they're sort of going through the skills, or as they're sort of getting back into their zone, almost always I'll notice them take this deep breath. And then I'll ask them, what are you noticing? They're like, oh, okay, well, I'm noticing less tension in my chest. I think my heart rate slowed a little bit. You'll notice their voice will calm down. You'll notice the cadence of their voice will seem a little different. And they'll say I feel more grounded. What they mean by that is they can sense that they're there. I can sense I'm sitting down right now. I can sense my butt on the chair. I can feel my feet on the floor. Because sometimes we get so carried away by our thoughts and what we're worried about, we don't even really have a sense of self. Okay. One of the tools we talk about a lot is Connect. There's a tool called Connect, and I don't get to talk about it as much as I would want to in an hour-long talk, but this is based on all the research around attachment, which you may or may not have heard of, but it's fascinating to me. But the way humans are wired is that we co-regulate and self-regulate. We do both, and we need to do both. It's how we're wired. So co-regulation is kind of what it sounds like. It's getting back into balance, getting back into your resilient zone with the help of someone you trust, someone you know well enough, someone you know who you can trust with how you're feeling. So, you know, the example I think a lot of us think of is, that's one of my go-tos. If I'm feeling really upset, I go through a list in my head. Okay, I can talk to like 3 of my friends. I can talk to my coworker, I can talk to my friend who lives in the neighborhood, or I can talk to my husband. Like, who can I talk to right now? Are they available? Is this someone that I can talk to help me sort of like get myself back to where I need to be? So that's co-regulation. And self-regulation is being able to get back into balance on your own, because sometimes we can't reach out when we need to. Sometimes it's something we just can't do right in that moment. So we have to learn how to self-regulate. But ideally, humans have a nice, even kind of 50-50 balance between co-regulation and self-regulation. Okay, so when we're connecting with people, and I know a lot of you probably know this, but we actually spend a lot of time teaching the skill of connect, because really connection and empathy are just about kind of holding space, right? When someone's upset and there really isn't a whole lot we can do about it, they're just upset. I mean, I think our natural tendency is to want to fix it. But truly just telling someone, okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. You make sense to me. I see you. I get it. You know, I'm here. That's really all you have to do. And just being able to stay with them as they're talking about that and holding that space, that is very healing. There is actually a lot of research around that. Believe it or not, just doing that, you're communicating safety, you're creating a connection that we can actually measure with neuroscience, and your brain starts to come back online, and you and they come back into their zone. Okay, so the last 3 skills I'm going to spend a lot more time on. Resourcing is a resiliency tool that I think everybody probably does naturally, but what they don't do naturally is use the sense and piece with it. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about this, because I think this is something that you can use throughout your day. You can teach to other people. In fact, you could teach all these skills to other people if you needed to. You can do it on the fly even. Okay, a resource is something positive that helps you feel good, calm, strong, or even just okay. Like, it's not, you know, you're not looking for something that's a kind of a happy pill. It's not going to make the bad things go away, but it's something that can help you access some other sensation, some other feeling. It's helping you harness and utilize that capacity that you have. I'm going to go on to the next slide and then I'll talk about it. So a resource can include, I mean, it really can be anything. It can be a person. I've done this with so many people. A place, like a really cool vacation you took a long time ago, or just a place you think is beautiful. It can be an animal or a pet. A lot of people choose pets. It can be an object. It can be an activity that you like to do, like hiking, gardening, running, walking. It can be cooking. It can be all kinds of things. It can also be something internal. It can be something that you just feel really proud about, like that you're a strong person, or that that you've gotten through a lot of hard things. It can be a physical strength. But resources are very specific, personal, and unique to the person. They're not general. So, for example, like for me, was trying to think of a good example that I might use as a resource. And I actually think of gardening for myself. I love to go out into the yard if I can, when I have the opportunity. I like to literally dig in the dirt, and I like the way the dirt feels on my hands. I actually love the way the earth smells. I love, like if I'm planting something, kind of pulling apart the roots and sticking it in the ground. And I know this sounds silly, but I actually will talk to the plant. So I'm putting it in the ground and we'll tell it like, I hope you do well. Like, I hope you will grow. I just planted a lot of tomatoes last week. And then once I put them out there and I water them and I feel like I'm nurturing them, and I'll go out there and I'll look at them and see how they're doing. I mean, even talking about that right now, I actually have a smile on my face. There's something about it that really helps me connect back to the earth. But your thing's going to be different. So resourcing you can do on the fly. You can do that during a break at work. You could go on a short walk outside. There's a lot of research around how nature is a resource. Just looking at the green, and right now, you guys, it's spring and the green is like golden yellow. It's beautiful. Notice just the trees. Put your hand on a tree, feel the texture of the tree. Or you could do it even if you can't go outside. If you have a break and you just want to think about something that brings you joy, it could be a child, it could be your pet, it could be like a place like the beach. Like, so many people have used that as a resource. And the idea is not just that you bring it to mind, but that you really, really paint a picture of it. Like, what is your resource? Like I just talked about, I like to feel the dirt in my hand. I like to smell the earth, and I can imagine myself pulling the roots apart. You really kind of have to get a lot of details to yourself in your mind's eye. You have to kind of paint a picture or make a little movie in your head of what it's like. And then as you're doing that, like as I'm doing that even now, when I think about smelling the dirt, I can kind of almost recall what that smells like. And then I feel this little bit of opening in my chest as I think about it. You have to really let yourself marinate in it. That's what I tell people. Like, think about what did it feel like if you were outside? What was the weather and the lighting and the temperature? Can you imagine those things right now? If you were doing that right now, what would that feel like? And then as you sense into those things, just allow yourself to stay there. Paint a picture. And then if you're doing this with somebody else, for example, let's say you're with a patient and they're talking and they're scared, but they've also told you about something they love. Maybe it's their grandchild or something. Ask them about the grandchild. Have them just tell you. You don't even have to tell them that you're resourcing. I bet some of you do this anyway. And then say, wow, I can see as you were talking about your grandchild, you have this smile on your face, or I see your eyes soften, and wow, I can tell how much you love them. And just have them sense into that. You can do that for yourself. You can do that for other people. It is really a powerful tool. Okay, so that's resourcing. Highlighting. Highlight is a tool that we use basically when kind of in a crisis, which we certainly think of COVID-19 as being, because it's a pandemic. So to go back to the brain science, when bad things happen, our brain only notices what's wrong, and temporarily, it really can't see anything else. So if you think about what's happening when something bad's happening or you're in a bad situation, it's like you get tunnel vision. Think about, your eyes, and all of a sudden your field of vision gets really narrow. And we focus on all the things that are wrong. And highlight questions help us notice something that maybe that's helpful, that exists right beside the awful stuff. It helps us like open that field of vision, open up how much we're seeing, right? And it's a really important tool. So highlight is about bringing the positive aspects into the story as well. So, and the reason we do this is it helps us neutralize the negative effect and avoid kind of creating this rabbit hole that sometimes we get sucked down into, where we end up really amped up or shut down. So, and it's not sugarcoating hard things. That's not at all what we're saying. It's certainly not going to make it, all of a sudden fine, but it's being able to look at the bad and the good. Okay. So, let me give you an example. I was trying to think of an example to talk to you guys about, and I think you can understand this one. Because I had a lot of nurses in the story, but I had a friend actually she's my very best friend, a couple of years ago, and she she had a spinal cord injury. She had a really bad mountain biking accident, and she actually, we weren't sure if she'd ever walk again. She actually almost died. It was very, very scary. I can remember actually hearing the news and how I remember just being completely amped up all of a sudden. But how I was so happy I knew this model actually when I was going through this, because it helped so much. So she was in Duke ICU for several weeks before she went to a special spinal cord injury place. And she actually is walking now. She'll always be she'll never be 100% again, but she is totally fine. So just to give you that information. But I remember being in the hospital with her. I would go over there and just be there and do whatever they needed. And her husband was in the room. I think in the very beginning, I'm pretty sure she was intubated. And I remember she even in that moment, her using humor and her husband using humor and watching them connect with each other. And I remember thinking, notice that, Tammy, notice how they're getting through this. And like, even as I'm telling you the story right now, I feel tears come to my eyes, because it was awful, but it was beautiful too. So highlighting what is helping, how are they getting through this? How am I getting through this? And then sense into it. That was very, very important. And I did that over and over again as days would go by and she was still in the ICU, and different friends would come in and they would and eventually that she wasn't intubated anymore, and they would talk, and her friends would come in and they would make jokes, or they would talk about things they would do in the future, and just noticing that and sensing into it was wonderful. It made all the difference in the world. So these are highlight questions. You're basically resourcing, but using the little bit, very real thing that's helping now. So maybe there's a hard thing happening at work, but maybe your colleague beside you is kind of amazing and rocking it, even though they're also scared. Can you notice that? And can you sense into that? Notice the change that happens. It's still scary, and there's a little bit of space to help you get through it a little bit better. And this is a quote that I think a lot of us have heard, but it's really just about highlighting. It was from Fred Rogers. When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. And the only thing we add to that is notice those people who are helping and sense how that feels in your body. Because it feels a lot better than the bad things. So you guys have a handout, and these questions are on there. All of the skills I'm talking about are on the handout. You can take it, you can keep it, you can practice it. But discovering the helpers, who's helping, what's helping you make it through right now? Has there been a moment in this when you felt slightly calmer, even for 30 seconds? What would someone you look to for guidance say to you right now? And then just notice as you ask those questions and as you sort of hear the answers or hear the answer in your own head, like, how does that feel in your body? You can certainly do this with people where you are. I've actually gone on a couple of trips after crises, like after earthquakes or hurricanes, or after a school shooting, and when we will actually use these tools, like who's helping, what's helping you make it through right now. People have an answer. I mean, it can be things like, my partner's helping me get through it right now. I know I can call them, and even for 5 seconds, they can say, I love you, I'm here. Can you sense that? How is that helping you get through? But people will have an answer for you. It might be tiny, but that doesn't matter. It's still helping them get through it. Okay, so the last tool is something that it's called Rapid Reset. And it's anything that brings positive sensory awareness into the present, and it can help you or someone else get back into their zone when they're either like up in that amped up space or the shutdown space. So you want to think about using a rapid reset tool with yourself or with somebody else when they're not in their resilient zone. So remember, if you're not in your zone, if you're too amped up or too shut down, your thinking brain is offline, so you can't really think clearly. So you need to get them like back into their zone a little bit so that you can use some of these other skills, because it's really hard to get to somebody to actually resource if they're amped up or shut down. And you can use these tools anytime. I use these tools all the time. I mean, they tend to be really helpful when you're like I notice for myself, if let's say I'm sitting with a client and I'm hearing a really hard story they're telling me, because I do work with a lot of trauma survivors, I'll notice, this is really hard. I'll notice my own activation usually in my chest, like a little bit of tightening or something like that. Or I might notice my mind wandering, because it's hard to sit with sometimes. So actually what I do a lot is I'm usually sitting when I'm working, and I will push my feet into the floor, because I can do that and my client doesn't notice. But what I'm doing is a rapid reset tool. I'm pushing my feet into the floor so I can notice my feet on the floor. And it helps that energy that I'm feeling have somewhere else to go. And it kind of reminds me, oh, I'm here right now. Nothing bad's happening. They help me kind of bring myself back to myself, because when we get too amped up or shut down, what's happening is that we're getting kind of carried away with our thoughts, and then our brain starts to think we're under attack, even though we're just kind of making up a story in our head. So I need to, for me, when that's starting to happen, I need to start to bring some physical sensation to bring my brain back online. I hope that makes sense. So for me, the rapid reset, you can make up your own rapid reset tools. Grounding is stuff like I was just talking about. I might like try to notice my bottom in the chair, or if I'm sitting, I might take my hands because people don't know you're doing this, even though you're doing it. And I might put my hands on the bottom of my chair and pull up really hard so I can feel my muscles engage in my arms. And I'm just going to notice the sensation in my arm. You can do this right now if you're sitting. Just pull up on your chair as hard as you can, and you'll feel your muscles engage. And it almost automatically makes me want to take a deep breath. Or like I said, I'll push my feet in the floor, and I'll try to notice the energy of me pushing my feet in the floor. And it helps my brain come back online. You can take a sip of water and notice the coolness going down your throat. That's another way. You can push up against a wall, which is literally putting your two hands against the wall and pushing as hard as you can. And then noticing you get your big muscle groups to engage. Taking a walk and being very mindful and noticing your feet on the ground as you walk. Or like I said, go touch a tree while you're outside. Singing or humming can help. People, I think, do this unconsciously, and it actually can be very helpful. Doing heavy work, like maybe there's a big pile of books or a big pile of something, and you need to move from one place to another place. engaging your muscles in heavy work and noticing the muscles engaging can really help. Orienting is, it really is exactly what it sounds like. It's moving your head from side to side, looking all around you. That's actually a way that we're wired. I mean, you see that with animals all the time, but orienting yourself is orienting in like scanning the environment for danger. Because again, if we're taken up by thoughts and fears, and there's not really a tiger right there right now, our brain can't tell the difference. It feels like you're literally under threat right in this moment. So orienting and allowing yourself to see, okay, it feels awful, but I'm safe right now, will help you. Tapping side to side, it's hard for me to demonstrate this without you being able to see me, but basically you cross your hands, your arms, and an X in front of you, and you can tap your arm from side to side and notice that sensation. And that actually also gives you that sense of bilateral stimulation to integrate the brain and bring it back online. There's something called EMDR that we do in mental health. It's been around 30 some years. It's well studied, but there's something about that bilateral stimulation of the brain that can be very, very regulating. Let's see. So, okay. I can't believe I got through it and we actually have time for questions. So there again, there's all kinds of rapid reset tools. Those are really helpful if you're feeling very, for lack of a better word, triggered. I've been practicing this so long that now I can tell when I'm about to bump out of my zone, and I will say to myself, okay, you need to go take a walk or push on a wall, or you need to do something, because I can tell it's coming. And I will do that to try to get myself back, calm down a little bit. Because I tend to live an amped up and some shut down more than any other when I'm out of my zone. So I'm happy to take questions. I'm happy to go back over some stuff. Again, there's a handout for you guys that I think will be helpful. It gives you some ideas of things you can do. Like, it basically goes over the information I just went over, but in a way that I hope might be helpful. So I guess I'll open it up for questions to see if there's any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. This is Camille again. And just to confirm what she said, the handout that she's referring to is currently posted on the NCNA website. So you can access that there. And then we'll, of course, have the recording and the PowerPoint posted later on, but you can access the handout now. So just a reminder, if you have any questions, definitely use the Q&A chat box to send those in. And Tammy has a few more minutes to answer those for us.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any questions?
There's not any submitted right now, so I'm not sure if there's any slides. I know you said you were kind of not going too into detail on some of the slides. So if there's any in particular that you wanted to go over, we do have some more time.
Well, what I would love to know is what tool, what would people want me to go over again? Surely someone has an idea about that.
Now, I do see somebody has their hand raised. Bernadette, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so you can ask your question. Bernadette, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi. For giving this. It was fabulous and the timing was perfect.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
I appreciate this. I'm wondering if you can just review briefly the hand-brain model.
Oh, yeah.
I had to step away for like 30 seconds and I could see the picture, but I missed it. If you just don't mind giving a summary of that, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Hey, is there any way people can see me, Camille? Because if I could do it, I don't like the picture as much as doing it. I could do it real quick for people.
Sure, I can probably.
Let me see if I can find it. It's super easy.
Yeah, so actually if you, on the bottom of your screen, the bottom left, do you see start video?
Yeah.
If you click that, it should turn your video on. And then that way you can demonstrate that for everybody.
Oh, it's saying no. Maybe if I stop share. How about that? Oh, it won't let me. Rats. It won't let me start my video. Okay, let me just go back to I'll go back real quick to it. Okay, so take your fist, everybody. So take your fist, and I want you to make a fist with your thumb on the inside of your fist, okay? Because this is I find this a little confusing. That's why I said you should go to go Google Dan Siegel hand brain model. You'll find all kinds of things and ways to teach it to little tiny kids. Kids totally get this. Okay, so as you're looking at your fist, it's kind of oriented like where I put it like next to my head, and the part where my fingers are folded over, that's the front of my brain. And then the back of my fist where my arm meets my wrist, that is, let's say that part is my survival brain. That's my brain stem, okay? So the brain stem is down here right at your wrist, right where it meets your survival brain is I really wish you could see me because I'm a visual person. But anyway, it's right here at the bottom of your hand, right by where your arm meets it, right? So if you open up your hand in that middle part where your thumb is, that's your amygdala. That's your emotional brain. It's more in the middle part of your hand. And then the amygdala is the smoke alarm of the brain. Remember, it's assessing for safety and threat. And for kids, a lot of times we'll call that like the barking dog. And sometimes people use hand puppet or little finger puppets for that. It's really awesome. And so when he or she assesses a threat, it starts barking, right? And then, so if you put your thumb back in there and you fold your fingers over, that your fingers folded over your thumb, that's your cortex, that's your thinking brain or your online brain or your resilient zone. And when they're teaching that to kids, they might call that part of your brain the wise old owl. That's your thinking brain, the critical problem solving skills, et cetera, et cetera. So let's say you're in a situation, it can be at work right now, and you're starting to sense some threat. I don't know, maybe there's a new patient that came in who your fear may have COVID, and you're just starting to feel a lot of activation, right? So this dog, the barking dog, starts to bark. And when he starts to bark, your fingers, which are your thinking brain, your wise old owl, they start to lift up. You see that at the last little diagram over here, this one, it lifts up, and your barking dog's going off, signaling danger, danger, danger. And it is talking to your survival brain, and your thinking brain is flipped. Dan Siegel calls that, you flipped your lid. You have no access to your thinking brain. You are reacting. You are in fight, flight, freeze. And I mean, as nurses, you're probably trained for that, like military, like you're trained over and over again. This is what you do. This is what you do. This is what you do. There's a reason, because you're not thinking as clearly at that point. And in order to get that offline brain back online, to fold your fingers back over, you've got to send the message to your survival brain. You're trying to talk to it. And our thinking brain and their survival brain do not talk the same language. So that's a short, and I hope that's helpful, but that is the hand brain model.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. And we do have a few other questions. One is, what is a reasonable amount of time for someone to get back to their resilient zone using rapid reset?
Such a good question. I wish I could remember the research, but do any of you remember, like, when they say when you hug someone, you have to hug, is it 20 seconds, 30 seconds? I can't remember, but there's a certain number of seconds. It's not even a minute, but that you need that long of a hug in order for your body to kind of register it. So basically that amount of time is about right. You can get back into your resilient zone that quickly, believe it or not. I'll give you an example. I'm going to use the example of my friend with her spinal cord injury. I remember exactly where I was when her husband called me and told me. I was at work And I had a client coming in, and he told me, and he burst into tears when he called me, which is really unlike him. And I was immediately offline. I was immediately that fingers flipped. And a lot of the clinicians in my office are trained in this stuff, so they get it. And I remember going and talking to the one who was free and just kind of muttering like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should see my client, if I should leave. I don't know what to do. Like, she wasn't even in the hospital yet. She was en route. And my friend and colleague, just because she knows me, normally you wouldn't put your hand on somebody when they're not in their zone, but she knew me well enough to know that was safe. She put her hand on my shoulder and she said, can you feel your feet on the floor? And I was like, oh, right. And that was because I'd been doing this long enough. I was like, oh, right. And I shifted my attention for a few seconds, and I was like trying to sense my feet on the floor, because I literally couldn't. I wasn't in my body really, and I sensed my feet on the floor for a few seconds. And then I know I didn't intentionally, but I took a deep breath and I went, oh, okay, right. And it was that fast. It blows my mind to this day that it is as effective as it is, but it really does work. Thank you. Somebody said 20 seconds. That sounds about right. And I was able to think. I was like, okay, yeah, I think I can see my client. Then I'll go get the kids. Then I'll do this. And I was able to problem solve. So it was really fast, and it blew my mind. It blows my mind every time I use it, and it works.
Yeah, I think that will take care of it for today. But thank you so much, Tammy, for this wonderful presentation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. No problem.